Hey, welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines. I guess as a parent, we all, for those of us who are parents, I guess we would all love to be able to share what we know with the children that we have, and it's not always possible. I was never the greatest parent, I don't think. In the early times I was divorced, I lost the first family, and it didn't work out well, and I didn't do so good. I tried really hard the second time with the second family, and I came to America with my son. It was an amicable separation, but of course there's no such thing as a pain-free split. Everybody gets hurt in their own way. But one of the things that I tried back then to do was to make my son think for himself. And so if he came to me and asked me questions which I thought he should know the answer to, I would say, what do you think? And then he would tell me the answer, and it would be the answer that I would have given to him. And I read somewhere of one of the great motivational speakers about how his parents used to sit in the chair, and when the kids were talking about what they'd had to do, they said, "Oh, did they make you sit in the chair?" And what they used to do was, if two of their kids were fighting, they'd sit them down in chairs sitting opposite each other, and they would have to stay there until they could do it without wanting to kill each other. And it was a punishment that they dreaded, and I guess later learned to inflict on their own children. Well, I remember that one of the things that I tried to do with my son was I tried to make him understand where I was coming from if I required him to do something. And on one particular occasion, he had called me and said, I won't be coming home straight from school. So I said, okay, why is that? So he said, well, I'm going to my friend's house, so I'll be home later. Okay, and your friend's phone number? Oh, Dad, you know. I said, well, what's your friend's name? Where does he live? What's his phone number? Well, by this time, my son had become too impatient with his nitpicking father and said, oh, forget it, I'll just come home. In other words, he had felt too embarrassed by these restrictions to say to his friend, oh, my father needs to have your name and address and phone number. So he was unwilling to share that as a restriction that he was required to fulfill. So when he got home, he was in a bad mood. Now, one thing that I did learn was that if neither party is taking incoming calls, I use that as a way of describing that in an argument no one's listening to anyone anyway, so pointless continuing with an argument, because if you're fighting old battles anew, then the person in front of you is not the one that you are arguing with anyway. You're arguing in some unknown space and time which has nothing to do with the present. So I didn't go into it right then, but a little while later I said to him, I want you to talk to me now about what happened. And then when he was then ready to take an incoming call, said, so this is what I would like you to think about, and I'd like you to go outside and think about it, and then when you've thought about it, come in. So, but if I had not asked you any of those questions and I had allowed you to do what you wanted to do, let's just imagine for a moment that you didn't come home, and me thinking that you would be home at say 7 and you don't come home at 7, then 7:30, and then 8 o'clock, then maybe 8:15, I would call the police, and they would send a cop round here. He'd be standing now in the living room where you're standing, and he would be asking me questions. And what do you think his questions would be? His questions would be, so what happened, sir? And I would have to tell him, my son called me and said that he was not going to be home on time because he was going to see a friend. Okay, sir, what's the friend's name? I don't know. Do you have a phone number? No. How about an address? No. So, sir, you let your son go to an unknown address without a contact number and without a name of the person that he was going to see? Yes. And then I said to my son, what do you think that policeman would rightly think about me as a parent? And I want you to go outside, and I want you to think about it. And I want you to think about it as if it were you that were the father, not me. And that you received the phone call that you gave to me. And he went outside, and he wasn't outside for very long, but he came back in and he said, I think you're right, and I understand, and I'm sorry. Now George Burns, the American comedian, said it's the phone call that every father dreams of having, the one where he picks up the phone and it's his child and his son says, hi Dad, you were right, sorry. Of course, those phone calls very rarely happen, but we have these situations where we try to do the best with our kids, and they don't always come out good, do they? The reason that I'm talking about this is because I just did a video a little while ago where I talked about the children that we are helping on our education program, education support program, where we give an allowance to a child based on their needs and where they are in their education. So obviously someone who's in the 7th grade and is at home and doesn't have to travel doesn't have the same needs as, say, one of our other students who is traveling to college and expects to graduate next year. So we give an allowance that is based on the need of the child. And when I see how a lot of these kids, they told us, we asked them to share something about their lives, because all of them had not met each other. So they were strangers to each other, but we want them to feel that they are a group. So we said, why don't you introduce yourself to the rest of the group so that they know a little about you, and tell us a little bit about your life situation. All of them different, all of them extremely challenging, and all of them really heart-wrenching, because they were being required to be so courageous. So it was a very emotional afternoon, and I gained a lot, a retro lesson about my own life. And somebody's knocking at the door, so I'd better go. Thanks for looking in, and bye for now.